think you might want to throw some miniature wargaming content up on YouTube, but you're not quite sure you've got what it takes. Let me take a little time today to show you my workflow process, my grotty little station, and provide a little bit of words of encouragement and a little bit of words of advice and things that you can think about if you decide that you want to turn your camera onto your table and show the world what you have to offer. We'll begin with a little bit of encouragement. Don't compare yourself, particularly right out of the gate, to the larger channels like Blackmagic Craft. I think that's one of them. I don't watch most of the big normie channels. Geek Gaming Scenics, although if I understand correctly, he shut down. Or even something like Gorilla Miniatures Games, right? He's got a full studio. He's got a great collection. He's got a bunch of table-ready stuff that's very achievable for 95% of the gamers out there. Don't worry about the painting channels that will show you amazing photorealistic paint jobs. It's not what we're about. Here at the Joy of Wargaming, we're about the joy of wargaming. That's why it's on the channel. I think is this where I put the thing? I can't, the little logo. I want to tell you what you bring to YouTube that no one else can bring, and that's your unique voice. It's your unique look. However you've decided to build your table and paint your figures, you have a consistent look that's all your own, and you have a fresh perspective that no one's ever heard before. Don't be afraid to show it off. And if you're not looking to make this a full-time gig, if you're not looking to make any money off it, relatable, then you don't have to go to any great lengths. Maybe you have a table in the basement. Basement 1908 is one of my favorite channels. Very friendly, very warm, very cordial. He's got a gorgeous table set up, but it's literally in his basement. There's shelves of just stuff behind him. Or even a guy like Henry Hyde, who has a studio up in, it's practically a crawl space. It's a glorified crawl space. It's up in his, he calls it the Loft Waffa, that's what it is. It's in his attic. It's a really nice attic. But you don't need that. This is a corner of my bedroom. That's not to reveal the magic, but that's the master suite bathroom, okay? So I just have this one little wall, and I'm going to show you how I do things. I'm going to tell you kind of what I'm thinking as I film my miniature war games, and just show you kind of what my setup is and a couple of minimum things that you're going to want. Let me begin by showing you what the room looks like on a normal basis. We got a little bedside table here. That's going to be my tripod stand. I'm going to have to clear everything off the top and swing it over here to where I do the actual filming. This is it. This is all the space I have. One wall and a little bit of furniture. And it takes a little bit of time. As you can see, it's my home office space, so I'm going to have to clear off the new laptop. It's not actually missing any keys, thanks to the birds, just yet. And then whatever all this stuff is. And over here in the other corner of the bedroom is my collection of shelves. Terrain. I've got a couple of binders, books, rules, a little more terrain, and then my battle mats and some odds and ends. A little bit. I do have some room in my closet with the pile of opportunity that gets larger every day, as one does. I have a nice little microphone I got for Christmas for podcasting. I got to set that up. We should probably start with the fact that you need a collection and you need miniature wargame stuff. I've thrown some dollar store terrain, whimsical little fairyland stuff down just to give us something to look at. We should talk about sound first. I'm filming during the daytime. Normally, I film at night when the birds are in bed, both the ones outside and the ones I share a house with. You'll probably hear them screaming before too long. We may even hear a rooster pop off. I'm going to leave that in, and I'm just going to take a deep breath, reset, tell you that I'm going to edit that out, and I'm not today. Normally, I would, but we'll move on. So the in-camera mic, that's all I use. I film everything on my cell phone. I have an Android. I don't even know what kind it is. I don't worry too much about that stuff. I'm going to be using this as my placeholder. Oh, this is a Samsung. I think it's like a Galaxy 8 or something. But the camera's fine. You know, you lock in if you on my particular camera. See how it just got a little brighter? If you touch the screen and hold it, it locks in the brightness. It locks in the focus. Sometimes I forget, and you'll see the camera struggling to maintain its focus. I catch it in the replay, and sometimes I go back and refilm, and sometimes I don't. We'll talk about lighting a little bit later. I want to show you the lighting setup. Before I do, just one thing to bear in mind. As you film, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the person that's going to be watching the video later. That shouldn't be a problem for you. You're a miniature wargamer. You are constantly looking at the guy across from the table and trying to deduce what his plans are so that you can disrupt his OODA loop. We know what that is, right? Observe, orient, decide, and act. If you can get him so that he's constantly observing and orienting himself, then he can never decide what to do and he can never act. That's the basics of the strategy that we do. To do that, you got to put yourself in his shoes. You got to think about, what does he know? What are his capabilities? And when you sit down to make a video like this, the person you're sharing your video with, you have to think, what does he know? If you're playing a popular game like Warhammer 40K, then he probably already knows the fundamentals of the rules and you don't need to go over that. He doesn't know what your roster is. So you're going to have to start out. Hey, here's the force I'm bringing. I'm bringing some mounted goblins. Here's a mounted goblin. Here's another mounted goblin. And I'm going to be going up against some dark elves. I got to take the auto zoom off. There we go. There's my dark elf. He's very dark. Let's turn that up. And here's his abilities. Now we're all on the same page. And you're going to have to put yourself in the shoes of a viewer that doesn't know what's happening. Now, there's no real right answer to this. Do I tell the viewer what the strategy is for the goblins and the strategy for the dark elves? If you're one guy playing solo, I usually do. The goblins are going to be aiming for these 3 resources. The dark elves are going to just hold in place. They're going to seize this one and try to hold it. Now the viewer knows what to expect, and you don't have to talk about that so much unless things change. Oh, the battlefield has changed, and now we have to change the expected strategy or tactics of the goblins. But the question becomes, wait a minute, this is all fairly dry and pointing down. What if I want to get a really good view of the action on the table? And so for that, we probably need to go back and talk about how to mount your camera. Now, as I've already said, I simply use my little end table. See, there it is. And it's even still got a ring of water on it. This is how the sausage is made, folks. To get your camera into position, you're going to need something to hold it steady. And right now, I'm using a tripod that looks a little something like this. I get it for $15 at Walmart. Let me pull back so you can see that just a little bit better. And it has some wonderful functionality. It stretches out. Oh boy, see, that's bright. There we go. So it can go pretty tall. Now, I don't generally go taller than that, because the footing on this camera is only about 8 inches across. I have, remember my shelf up here? One of the things I like about my setup is that my shelf has extra figures. It's got rulers, dice. So I've got it all within reach. There's 6 inches. So the tripod base is only about 7 or 8 inches across. The taller it gets, the more wobbly it is, and the less secure the camera is, and the more wobble you get. So I try to keep it fairly low, fairly limited, something like this. How about attaching the camera? Well, that's what this attachment is for. This is the one I like best. It's a little spring-mounted clamp, and all you have to do is put your cell phone in and snap it in place. This particular tripod has a nice little rotation. You loosen this, and you can spin this most of the directions you want. Theoretically, it should drop down into this slot so you can achieve an angle. Doesn't always work so hot. And that lets you step back. And so I really like that one because it gives me height. I may need to put a few extra books underneath the base to lift it up a little bit higher and keep it stable. But what about when I want to get really tight, really close in on the action and just show, here's a fight between a spear guy and a mounted goblin. If I want to show that, then it's a simple matter of popping my camera off, swinging it around. So now I'm in this smaller desk mounted, and I can get really close. Now, as you might expect, this leads to some shuffling of terrain. I knocked my flowers over. I'm going to have to remember to stand those back up later. But now we can get right in there. And the really nice thing about this way is that when it comes time to roll the dice, I can get those on screen too. For my part, I much prefer rolling the dice on the table. It's very immediate. You get instant results. It links the dice to the action. It's great. Some of the other channels will have a separate dice tray set off, so they'll cut back and forth. World of Wargaming does that. Every time it's time to roll the dice, he stops the camera, he rolls the dice in a tray, he counts the results, look, snake eyes, and then he stops the camera and he goes back. Every time you do that, you have to edit. This is the other little secret I have. I don't like to have any more edits than is absolutely necessary. So by rolling the dice right here, I can just keep going. Okay, we tied, and then this guy tried to run away, and I have to roll the dice again. I don't have to edit every time I roll the dice. It's not quite as clean. World of Wargaming does a great job with his segues between the table and his dice tray and back to the table. But it takes longer, and that may be a consideration. If you're trying to produce 2 to 3 videos a week, as we do here in the House of Wargaming, every extra edit adds another 5 to 10 seconds. Well, if you add 100 edits, that's another 5 to 10 minutes you might not have. So that's something else to consider. This particular tripod, as you can see, it's just a set and go. It does still have that nice little, you twist this to loosen up the ball joint so you can set your angle, but because it has a narrower base, this one is literally only 6 inches across, even a camera as small and light as this will tend to tip it over. It's a lot less stable, but you can really get in there tight. I have another one that looks a little something like this. Now, I like this is, again, like $12 at your local Walmart. And this one allows you to lock that camera in. We'll pull out and pull up. And this still has, oh, that's one of the issues. Sometimes I accidentally turn it on. So there you go, Samsung Galaxy. The nice thing about this one is it's got a pistol grip. And it folds up nice and neat. So when I want to film with this guy, I can just hold it like this and I can move around a little more. It's easier than trying to pinch like so. But when you're not doing it that way, this gives you, now the downside is your camera's over here, so you might get this foot. But this lets you get really tight. And of course you can zoom in and zoom out to get really tight on the action if you want to. But again, you're generally going straight onto the table, so terrain considerations might be an issue. If I'm trying to get a shot right here, I might need to move old Mother Willow out of the way. And then after I'm done filming, make sure I put her right back where she was so we don't have any continuity errors. But again, if you're solo wargaming, if you're just showing people how the game works, an inch or two either way isn't going to make or break the game. We're not engaged in a tournament here, are we? So that's the kind of 3 that I have. Very stable base. Not quite as stable, but it does allow you to sometimes straddle over the terrain a little bit better. And then this is my go-to. Each of these costs about $10 or $15. Start with this, and then add more in as you go, and you'll be fine. So that's tripods, and that's kind of positioning and trying to get some really good looks. Now, the other thing we haven't talked about yet is how to light your individual shots. And I struggled with this for a long time. The real secret here is that you really can't have too much light. Your camera can pull back and reduce the amount of light that it's taking in. But the more you try to amplify the amount of light that it's taking in a dim setting, the lower the quality, just the worse it looks. So try to get as much light as possible. Today's video, I'm filming in the daytime. It's a little louder. I have to choose between noise and bright lights. I've got ambient light from the windows, and then I also have my 2 lighting fixtures. So let me show you how those work real quick. I know the lighting is terrible. I'm showing you the lighting, and I don't have outside lighting to show you how great these lights are. I know the lighting on this shot is terrible. I don't have outside lighting to show you what the good lighting looks like. I want to show you what these 2 armatures look like. And in fact, it is on an armature. It clamps directly to the desk. And these cost me, I think, like $50, $60 on Amazon. It's an LED series of lights that has a diffuser on it. This thing that you can't really see very well. Here, let's stop looking at me and we'll start looking at the light. This is called a diffuser. It takes this harsh white light and it puts a little bit of a fog on it to soften it up. And the nice thing about this particular setup that I have is that it also bounces light off of the back wall. So I get a natural backlight going. We're going to put our light in on the table. Now, the really nice thing about these armatures is, as you can see, I can rotate the light and I can bring it down, I can bring it forward. So when I want to put light directly on my boys down here on the table, I can do that without any muss or any fuss. It's also far enough away that I can get directly overhead. Let's see if we can bring that lighting in a little bit better here, huh? Nope. Nope. There we go. Now, we don't want to shine it at the camera because it'll blind the camera. But this way, as I'm playing with my tripods down here, I can get that light. Usually, you want it kind of behind the camera here, but I have a lot of options for how I set that up. And of course, I've got one on either side, so we can do the same thing. I can bring it over here and get a little more light there, and I can swing it. So that allows me the greatest flexibility without drowning things. In a perfect world, I would have big diffuser lights over here set up in the corner of the room that would just cast a huge gray light over everything, and I wouldn't have to worry about that at all. I'm going to zoom back down to the table now because there's one other thing I want to show you when it comes to lighting your figures on the tabletop. So here we are, we've zoomed back down to the table. The outside world might as well not exist. I have wonderful lighting that shows our dark elf. It's pretty clear who's who's on the wolf, who's the boss goblin on the wolf. Everything looks great. I'm going to pull back for a second, show you where I've got my lighting set up, and then we'll come back down and we'll play around with the lights and I'll show you what changes. So as you can see, I've got one a little above and to the right and one a little above and to the left. That's going to cut down dramatically on the shadows that the viewer sees. If I bring my light too close, then I'm going to have a nice, bright, washed out area over here. If I turn this light off, the same light over here on the stage left, then this is a classic case of not enough light. You see the dark, well-defined shadows there? That's what we don't want. Well, maybe you do if you're doing like a horror game. That might be an effect you're looking for. But generally speaking, we want to be able to light both the left and right-hand side of the table. This way, yeah, we've got a couple of like stadium lights with a couple of diffuse shadows, but the shadow being cast by that light is being knocked down by that light, and vice versa. Yeah, I cut myself working on the chicken coop, so forgive the Band-Aid. Like I said, we're not exactly we're playing at the highest level. We're not filming at the highest level. It's all right. And so again, if I move my camera over because I want to see things from this perspective, well, I may need to move my lights. I may want to bring it up a little bit higher. See how directly overhead leaves these guys in shadow? I'm going to lower it down so it's even with about right there. And I'm going to bring the other one over right behind the camera. So our shadows are a little too dark there. So just play with it a little bit. Which one do you think looks great? I think that looks good. Now we're ready to roll the dice once again. We may want to pull back so we've got more room for the dice, or maybe we decide, I really want to highlight those miniatures. I'm going to get right up on them, and now I've got room behind to roll the dice, if that's how we're doing it. And of course, it all depends on the story that you're trying to tell. It depends on whose perspective you're taking. The other piece of advice I'll give you is this is what they call don't cross the fence. If you are filming a conversation for a TV show, then typically what will happen is you will have one person on this side of the screen and he'll talk in this direction. And then when he's talking to someone, if these guys are talking to each other, the cameras will always stay on this side of those two characters. So you'll see a close-up of a person here, and then the other guy will be on, so that close-up you see is on the left-hand side of the screen. And when we cut to the close-up of the goblin, he'll always be on the right-hand side of the screen. So as they talk back and forth, you're cutting back and forth like this. And even if the elf isn't on the screen, right, we're not even over his shoulder, you know where he is because Mr. Goblin is looking in that direction. If we then turn the camera so it crosses like this, then as your elf is talking, he's going back and forth, and it's very confusing. You don't notice these things, but your brain does. So the same rule holds when you are doing your miniature war game footage. I, of course, have a wall right there, so it's really hard for me to put the camera on that side of the table. But even if I could, I probably wouldn't. I would stay on this side of the table so that if I have an enemy over there and an enemy over here, I'm always filming from this direction so that Stage left is always on the left of your screen, and stage right is always on the right of your screen. I don't need to say that, because if you're looking at the action over here, and I have an edit where we bring the action over here, you already know exactly where these guys are. You know, your brain fills in those gaps, so you don't have to think about that. If I went to the other side of the table, it would look, obviously, these guys would trade places. And suddenly the viewer would have to spend more brain power thinking about, wait a minute, why was the goblin over there and now he's over there, when you really want him thinking about the rules. Every little bit of thought that you can take away from the filming process lets you think more about the rules and limits the amount of mistakes that you make on camera. And this is one of the reasons why I don't stress too much about people correcting me on matters of strategy or rules. And I think most people, and this is one of the words of encouragement I would give you, most of your viewers understand that you're doing multiple jobs all at the same time. You're a cinematographer, you're trying to play the game, you're trying to remember the rules, you're trying to implement strategy, you're trying to make sure the lighting and the sound, everything is right. That's a lot to take on all at one time. So viewers are generally very patient with you. And the ones that are not worth worrying about. They're not here for the war games anyway. They're here for other things. And I'm not even going to speculate on why they're what they're here for, and why it's probably just to show what a smart boy they are. As a little bonus, before we kind of close out, I do have this weird thing. I haven't really used it a lot. I debated whether to show it to you or not. It's when you really want to get in close. You slide your camera in. This is what it looks like set up. It's not the most stable platform, but it will allow you to get really tight on the action. Let's take a look at exactly how tight. Almost too tight. My camera can't even quite zoom in on that. And of course, we can take a moment to fix our lighting, but if I get any closer, it just kind of washes out. And that's why I don't use this one, except in some very extreme situations. There's old Mother Willow. There we go. So she looks pretty good. But he's going to have to back off just a bit. So these are the thoughts that you have. Of course, you can always just pull your camera back a little bit. And sometimes that little tripod gives me just enough oomph. But honestly, if I take it out here, see, there it is. It's gone. I can just rest my cell phone directly on the table and get that miniature's eye view. Look out behind you, Mr. Dark Elf. And without too much of the wiggle, because it's got that full contact with the table. And there you have it. That's my low-end introduction to running a miniature wargame YouTube channel, thinking about cinematography, presentation, talking to your viewer. You're going to need about a $15 tripod. Get yourself some decent lights, even some table lamps with a nice cheesecloth draped over them. LED lamps so you don't burn your house down would be good. I like this setup because I've got a shelf where I can put some extra materials, dice, figures, what have you, measuring instruments. I do have one extra light up here. I don't use that very often, but it does give me a nice blue light down. It's battery operated, so it only lasts like an hour or two, and it starts to dim over time, and sometimes I don't even notice it. So you might see a video once in a while where my lighting gets progressively dimmer throughout the video, and as I go back and edit it, I realize, oh geez, I probably should have recharged that for a little while before I continued. But again, when I'm making these videos, I don't like to break them up and film one on Monday night and finish the second half of it Tuesday night. I need to be able to film it all in one continuous hour, 2-hour stretch so I don't forget where I'm at and what I'm doing and forget some of the other rules. But that's it. A couple of tripods, one for close work, one for distant. Get yourself a couple of these armatures for your table. I have, of course, my table's 2 foot by 4 foot, so I have an extra foot of space on either side for putting rule books and extra miniatures, army lists, cheat sheets, quick reference sheets, whatever you have. And then, of course, I've got a couple of extra shelves just for decoration, dinosaur skulls, a little bit of water from I think that's Fatima. Yeah, Our Lady of Fatima from the springs there. Just so that keep her smiling down, keep her blessing us as we go. And I don't know, what else? If you have any questions, go ahead and throw them down in the chat. And if I get some time later on, maybe I make another video addressing all those questions. Or at a minimum, I'll be sure and hit you up in the chat and answer those questions. As far as specifics goes, I mean, I don't know. I've cobbled this together over the last 4 or 5 years, and just keep experimenting. Go back and watch my earlier videos. I like to think that they've improved over the last few years, and your early videos will probably be a little bit grotty as well. Good news is, maybe not a lot of people see those, but over time they'll get better, and as they get better, more people will tune in. And just again, I'll leave you with this thought. You have the one thing that no one else has. You have your perspective. You have your personality. You have your experience, and you should be out there sharing that with the rest of the hobby, because that's what keeps it interesting. It's that kind of shared information. I don't know that that helps the hobby grow, but I can tell you that it helps the hobby improve. Even if all you're doing is talking to a bunch of gray-haired old guys, we love you for it. We appreciate the time. We appreciate the effort. I think you'll find it's a much more, almost to a fault, it is a welcoming community. Is there anything else? There's probably a bunch of stuff I forgot, but it's getting late and I'm hungry. So until next time, I'm praying for you.